Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
So at this point, we typically introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Henry.
Hi, my name is Alma.
Matthew,
Steve, Stephen, Jeremy,
David,
Andy, Michael,
Bob,
Tom.
My name's Cass. I'm Brad.
Paul,
Norman.
Michael.
And online, let's see, we have Francis, Marvin, Daniel, Tyler, Joe, Steve, John, Jeffrey, Jim, Giz, and Ron. So, now I have the pleasure of introducing to you our speaker for today, Reverend Daigan Gaither. Began Buddhist practice in 1995 in the Vipassana insight tradition, and then began studying Zen in 2003. He received lay ordination in 2006, where he was given the name Daigan, or Great Vow, and received priest ordination in July 2011. Daigan speaks internationally on a variety of topics, particularly around gender, sexuality, social justice, and their intersections with the Dharma. He also sits or has sat on a number of boards and committees that serve community needs and further social justice causes. Daigan has a BA in philosophy and religion from San Francisco State University and an MA in Buddhist studies with a chaplaincy certificate and a certificate in Soto Zen Buddhism from the Graduate Theological Union and the Institute of Buddhist Studies. He lives in San Francisco, California, and identifies as a disabled, queer, white, cis male. Learn more at queerdharma.net. It's all yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to start off with two Zen stories. The first one, a student goes up to his teacher who's meditating and says, "What's the business under the road?" In other words, what are you doing? What are we doing? And the teacher responds, "Intimacy." Everybody's enlightened, they bow, yada yada, right? As Zen stories go, they always end with somebody enlightened and bowing. The second one, the teacher goes to the student who's meditating and says, "What are you doing? What's happening here?" Student says, "I don't know." Teacher says, "Not knowing is most intimate." Everybody's enlightened, they bow, ta-da. So, and I think these two stories go well together because I think that when we think of practice, when we think of formal meditation and sitting on the cushion, and we think about what's the process we're doing there, hopefully we're developing some intimacy with ourselves, with our stories, with our ideas, with our opinions about those stories and ideas and situations. And sometimes when we're really lucky, we we also start to develop intimacy with the experience of it all. Like not just the story about it, but the experience of it, right? And so we're developing this intimacy with ourselves. What's it like to be me? But then there's this rub, right? Like I sit down and I start to have an experience and I think I know what it is, so I have, all of a sudden, the whole thing builds on itself, right? I'll be sitting down and I'll notice my heart racing, my breath becomes shallow, my muscles start to tighten, and I think, oh, that's anxiety. But if I can let go of the that's anxiety part, I can start to see, oh wait, the same exact physical experience happens to me when I'm feeling attraction. Or I'm feeling overwhelmed. Or I'm feeling nervous. When I know it's anxiety, I begin to try to treat it like anxiety. And when it's not anxiety, I get confused, right? And things get complicated and messy. But if I can not know, if I can just let myself be curious instead of certain, it changes the nature of my relationship to my experience. I'll have an idea or a thought that arises as I'm meditating. And I'll think, oh, that's that old story I have about how I'm not worthy, blah, blah, blah. I'm certain of it, so I start to think like, oh, okay, this is how I could get rid of that thought, and because it's a bad thought, and this is my opinion about it, and so, and it just turns into this long trail, because what happens? We have a feeling, and then we have our feelings about our feelings. And then we create a story about our feelings about our feelings. And then we have a feeling about the story of our feelings and our feelings. And it just becomes this whole sort of constructed thing that then becomes me. Right? Because it's not an experience, it becomes a self. This is who I am. Instead of, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what it's like to be me. And this is what the Buddha meant when he said, there's no unchanging, independent self. Our ideas and our feelings about our ideas aren't real unless we decide they're real and we pour concrete on them and make them real, and then they become a self. And we try to fit everything into this idea of myself. But can I just crack that a little bit and start to think, well, what if it's not? What if it's not this thing? What if it's not this story? What if I don't feel anxious about my anxiety, but I just let myself have anxiety? And let anxiety be an experience and not an identity. And so when we sit down, when we start to settle and find ease and stability in our own physicality, in our experience of the sensual moment, right? When we start to pay attention to the senses and we start to let go of the thoughts and ideas and just allow them to arise and pass away and not make them who we are, but what we're experiencing. Thought arises, oh, I'm having this thought. Okay. And the thought will go away of its own accord because I haven't decided what it is and I haven't put concrete on it and I haven't made it a thing and then identified it as me. So it can arise and it can pass away. And then I can get curious about what that was like. What's it like to be me having this experience? What's the nature of my experience? Rather than deciding who I am and then making the nature of my experience fit this identity that I've created for myself. There's another very long story written by Daigan, the founder of the kind of Zen I practice. And in this long story, there's a part in which he says, to carry ourselves forward and experience myriad things is delusion. But to settle and allow myriad things to come and express themselves is enlightenment, is practice realization. When instead of trying to create something or some way and some world based upon my own feelings, thoughts, ideas, and emotions, what if I just sat down and I noticed my experience? I allowed the myriad things, all of the causes and conditions of this moment to just come and express themselves. How does that change the nature of my reality? But also, how does it change the nature of my relationship to myself and to everything around me? To both what's happening inside the skin bag and what's happening outside the skin bag. So we start to try to cultivate intimacy. And then we try not to be so certain about what it is we find there. Try to develop the curiosity to let our experience speak to us. So that then when we have a response, right? Because enlightenment is an appropriate response. When we have a response, it comes from this settled place of curiosity. Well, what happens if I do this about this? What if I have anxiety and I just sit here for a minute? What if I'm just depressed and I still go shopping and buy my groceries? What changes in my relationship to the stuff around me if I am not so sure? Can I let go of my need to make it fit some idea I have about myself, the world, my friends, my enemies, that idiot on the bus, the asshole in the car in front of me, and all of those things that I've created about the world I exist in? What if I let go of those and just started to go, that's interesting. I'm really mad at this guy in front of me. Why? I'm not in a hurry. The 30 seconds it's taking me extra because they're not following my rules doesn't really change whether or not I'm late. Because if I'm late, I'm already late. If I'm not late, which is most of the time, it doesn't matter, right? I start to get curious about the experience I'm having and try to see if I can come up with different ways of responding. And that works most of the time, except on the days that it doesn't. And then I just try it again. I just sit down again. I just try to settle into my experience again. Try to become intimate with myself. Because like all things in the Buddha Dharma, everything starts within the skin bag. It's all going to come from here. Partially because that's the only place I actually have any influence. Nobody can practice for you. Nobody can develop that intimacy for you. But one of the benefits of experiencing the world in this way, with this uncertainty, is that there becomes the ability to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we're confronted with hard truths about ourselves, our lives, something we said. Oh my gosh, I really hurt that person's feelings. I made this asshole comment, but I can be in that discomfort because I recognize, one, it's not who I am, it's just the experience I have. And two, I can make genuine apologies and be accountable for the things that I've done that harm people. Because I'm not afraid to be uncomfortable. It's okay when I screw it up. Because I've developed the capacity to be intimate with myself. I can look in those dark corners, I can look in those hard spots, and I could start to bring sunlight there. So that maybe the choices I make aren't coming from this blinded, dark spot. They're not coming from some idea I have about myself and the world that I've convinced myself is true and concrete and unchanging. That's just like me. Except on the days it's not like me. So I want to invite you to start to cultivate curiosity, to cultivate the intimacy with yourself, to try not to be so certain. Because that's the key to the intimacy that we're trying to develop. Not knowing is most intimate. And even about my practice, sometimes I have this idea about, this is what it means to practice. Until I meet somebody who doesn't practice like that, and then it's like, oh wait, but is that practice then and this isn't? Or is it both? Is it neither? I start to question, when I'm so certain about what it means to practice, that I make it concrete and I make it a thing. Anything that's not that thing then isn't practice. So I've created this elaborate schema of who's a Buddhist and who's not. But then you meet Buddhists who aren't doing that. The majority of Buddhists in the world do not meditate. Don't care to. Don't find it useful. They're still Buddhists. They're still practicing. They're still in the Buddha way. It just doesn't look like I think it's supposed to look like. Because what I think it's supposed to look like is really just my opinion about a whole bunch of shit that I've learned about that's actually this narrow sliver of the world. Earlier in the long Zen story I was telling, there's a line that says, To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by myriad things. Intimacy. Not knowing. Let the world come and tell us what it is. Let our experience tell us what it is, and then it can tell us what it needs. But if I'm trying to tell my experience what it is, then I've already decided what it needs, and oftentimes that's not actually what it needs, and so then it misses the mark. And it just becomes a sort of cycle of discomfort. So I also don't think that I'm the smartest person in the room, neither in this room or that room. So I want to open it up to our shared wisdom. I invite you to make comments, ask questions, so that we can further open up this topic. Thank you very much for your attention. Oh my gosh, I was right on time. I'm completely impressed by that. Thomas.
Thank you so much, Daigan. This is one of those instances where I wish the Dharma talk were given first before we meditate. It would have been so helpful. The hard part is remembering to do this in the moment. But one of the challenges, too, in this that I experience when I do become intimate with, like, okay, I'm experiencing this, or I did that, or, proactively, it's very helpful, what would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? But retrospectively, why did I do that?
Right.
Why didn't I stop and think? I love this saying that when I feel the most urgency to act is usually when I'm most not thinking straight.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how do I not fall into the trap of judgment, blaming, seeking perfection in the past, which is already gone?
Right.
That's where the suffering comes.
Right. And I think that's when we try to develop that idea of letting our experience speak to us rather than us speaking to our experience. Can I settle in and just let that experience register? Before I make opinions and ideas about, I screwed it up, or I messed that up, or whatever. Before any of that, can I just let that experience be there? And let it register in my body so that it tells me what it needs to tell me rather than me telling it what it is. And if I can't come up with that, if other people are involved, then I can go to those people and go, hey, I'm getting a sense that I created some tension here in this moment. Can we have a discussion about it? Are you comfortable having a discussion about it? And then in our discussion about it, we end up in some place where if I'm not so convinced about what the experience is, if I'm curious about it, maybe I can learn and grow from it. And there's an opportunity for me to be accountable for it if it's in fact harmful. Right? So again, can I not be so convinced by my stories? Can I not be so convinced about my ideas about things and let those experiences tell me what they need to tell me? And then let that telling also tell me what it needs. What's an appropriate response to this experience? Sometimes, if I go back to the other people involved, it's just going to create more blame. It's going to create more suffering. And so I need to just keep my damn mouth shut. Right? And just try to not make that same mistake again. Sometimes I need to go back and be accountable and make apologies that don't center me, right? Because if I've created harm, the person who's supposed to be centered in that conversation is not this one. So again, it's letting go of the certainty and the ideas about it and trying to come into these moments with curiosity. I hope that helped.
Yeah. And maybe having a little compassion for who I was in the moment when I took that action.
Right.
I was in distress. Poor me.
Right.
So.
And having compassion for the whole experience, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we have questions online?
Richard O'Brien, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. I had the great fortune to have a teacher that taught me about non-attachment. I lacked curiosity all my life, lacked the desire to learn about new things. Partly, I think, because of undiagnosed ADHD growing up and just an aversion to learning. So curiosity has eluded me most of my life. But I was taught that to be unattached, because of the ADHD, I have to make lists every day and check off boxes, the things that I have done, need to do, in order to stay focused and organized in my life. And yet I've learned to completely be unattached to those lists and the results of them. Because things happen.
Right.
And it's happened the way I planned. And it's not, the world doesn't revolve around me. So thank you for reminding me of that. And the lesson in non-attachment to everything, myself, my ideas, my thoughts, other people's actions or reactions, not be attached, because there's a billion ways to look at everything, and it's not just my slice that you called it. Thank you very much.
And thank you for bringing that really clear example and that teaching in, because it's really beautiful. I too live by the list. And when I first started living by the list, my opinions about what got done and didn't get done, because I also thought that the list was prioritized when it really was just a bunch of random words on a paper. But I really appreciate that non-attachment piece. So thank you very much. Hi, Henry.
Daigan, thank you for talking about intimacy with self. And my question is, the word intimacy always brings up to me the subject of interpersonal relationships. And I'm wondering if the concepts you've been talking about today have also to do with the intimacy in interpersonal relationships.
Absolutely. If I'm with my partner, whether I've known them 20 years or 20 minutes, if I'm with my partner and I have this idea and story about who they are and what they are, when they don't act in accordance with that story, I get pissed off or I get uncomfortable, right? Because I'm attached to the story. But if I can just go in with curiosity, who's this person today, right? I've known them 25 years, but who are they today? Oh, this is new for them. Or I have this idea about what they're saying or why they're saying it, but maybe that's not true, so maybe I should check in with them. And believe them when they tell me what's going on, versus trying to fit what they're saying into my ideas about what is happening here, or what I want to happen. So again, it's the same exact process, right? It's like when we do meta practice, right? We start here, and then we move out to our friends and loved ones, and then we move out to the community, and then we move out to the world, and then we move out to all beings in the universe. It's the same practice, whether I'm doing it here or here. Practice is practice. And I've noticed in my own life, when I'm curious about the people that I'm in relationship with, the nature of my relationship is changing. It changes because, one, I start to trust them to tell me what they need. I'm not writing some script for them to follow. Right? There's nothing worse than writing a script and then the person you're talking to doesn't follow it, and then you're like, wait, that's not the script I wrote. But they never got the script. But if I can instead sort of settle into my experience of the moment and bring my whole self to this moment, right? All of me, without that certainty of this, my story, but just all of the complexity of being me. Then we can have this relationship that's completely different because it's based on sort of exploration and uncertainty, but also comfort. Because I'm not telling them who they are, and I'm not telling myself who I am. And so we both get to discover both of those in that moment. Did that help?
Yes.
Hi, tell me your name.
Hi, my name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Thank you for your talk. So I'm just kind of wondering about, you're talking about stories and I guess identification, right? And how we identify ourselves. How does that fit in with all the identity politics, right? With the labeling that we all do. I'd be curious about your thoughts on how you work with that and
Totally.
suggestions.
Yeah. So when I first started practice, I was very much convinced that I had this idea about what it meant for me to be queer, right? And it was, I'm queer. And this is what it means. And this is how you're going to treat me. And all of this sort of rigidity that comes along with being so tied to what it means to have that identity, right? I took that identity and I poured concrete on it and it solidified. But if I cannot do that, if I can break out that concrete a little bit and let that queerness breathe, or my maleness breathe, if I'm not so convinced about what it means to be that, and I just let that express itself, so that it becomes the activity of the moment and the experience of the moment, and not the thing of the moment. Right? My identity is not a thing, it's how I am in the world. And how that expresses itself changes. I mean, it's certainly a lot different now than it was in 1995. A lot different than in the 80s, and a lot different than it was in the 70s. Because the world's changed, I've grown up, I've matured, my body's different. Like, all of these things are different. So what it means for me to be queer in the world today is much different than what it meant for me to be queer in the 80s. And I think when we're talking about the politic of it, right? Because yes, queerness has a politic to it. I think so. A great example. In the 80s, I was really angry. I was very involved in ACT UP and Queer Nation and all of these things, and I was really angry. Lots of demonstrations, lots of marching, lots of showing up to things and disrupting, because we were young and disruptive. And I think also we were trying to get people to pay attention and to really hear what it is that we're saying. That's changed now. One, I'm tired. Right? Like, I'm not really interested in getting arrested anymore. Jail's not nearly as much fun. But the politic of my queerness really is the same, which is I just want to live. I just want to be in the world. I want to experience liberation. And I think the same is true for any marginalized community. From what people tell me, I'm not living those experiences. I can't say for certain, but I listen to a lot of people who don't look like me, who aren't gendered like I am, who exist in the world in a different way. And what they tell me is the same exact thing, that when they solidify into what it means to be them, they lose part of the humanity of that experience. And what the politic really should be about is rehumanizing in those places where we've been dehumanized. And whether that's gender or race, queerness, ableism, all of those things, right? Like, we're just trying to rehumanize the other humans that we share the planet with. I want to be rehumanized. Did that help? Did that open that up a little bit?
Honestly, I'm really confused.
Great!
Yeah. No, in terms of, because I guess I'm just confused about, I don't know, it's hard for me to even explain what my question or my confusion is, but just in terms of and I don't want to be too intellectual about it, but so for example, I was thinking when you were saying about you want to be humanized, and on one hand, of course, I think I understand what you're talking about, but on another hand, I was like, wait a minute, isn't that perhaps for me a kind of limiting identity or story in terms of who I am?
No, because if we hold on to the idea that human beings are ever changing, not solidified.
Okay. So it's like the fluidity of just being like an energy and motion?
Right, and the experience of it rather than the identity of it. So the experience of queerness becomes how I relate to my queerness versus the identity, the thing of queerness. Because when it becomes a thing, it's not human.
So, but this is, I think, thank you, you're helping me with where my confusion is, because I guess I've been contemplating, am I experience? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's what's been on my mind lately.
Yeah. And I think we are experience. And that's what we're trying to get to. That's what we're trying to see, because we've covered up experience with opinions and ideas and facts and knowledge and certainty, rather than having some relationship to just what's it feel like to be me.
Okay, so thank you. You're helping me see what I'm actually contemplating, right where I'm kind of...
Right.
I guess it's just difficult to sort out.
It is.
When you say experience, whether that's an emotional reaction or a thought.
It's underneath all of that. It's more pure. My emotional reaction is actually in addition to the experience of it. And it usually comes after the experience. I have an experience, and then I have a feeling about the experience. And then I have a feeling about the feeling of the experience. And then I have a feeling, an idea or a story about the feeling about the feeling about the experience. So it becomes this long train that all of a sudden I'm this far away from the actual experience of it. And I'm trying to get back to the actual experience of it. Which is why...
Because you're saying that you are the experience.
Exactly. And that's why it's that's why it's always changing. That's why we can't be so certain. Because we are the experience. We're not our identity. It's not concrete like that. And so when I can come back to it, and rather than me telling the experience what it is, I let the experience tell me what it is. and then the experience can tell me what it needs. And it takes a lot of practice, and I will say, I've been doing this now for 30 years, and I get it right 3 out of 10 times, where I can really connect with the experience of myself. And what's it like to be me? What's the nature of this experience? But I just keep doing it. And sometimes I'm close, sometimes I'm far away. But either way, I recognize that even when I'm far away, it's not, I know that that's not real. The stuff in between is not real. So that then, even if I can't reach the actual experience of it, I know that the things I've added on are just things I've added on. And so I don't have to be so convinced by the things I've added on. But we are not identity, we're an experience. That's why our bodies become so important, right? We sit on the cushion, or we sit in a chair, or we focus on the physical experience. We watch our breath, or we watch a physical sensation. And we keep returning to the physical sensation and not following every thought and idea. Because the physicality of this moment, the sensual experience of right now, is the only time, like the only way we experience our body is right now. We don't experience our body yesterday or tomorrow, right? So when we bring our focus onto the physical experience, it brings me present. So that then I'm actually closer to the experience. And if I'm not following my thoughts and ideas, I'm still closer to the experience. So what I would say is, see if you can just keep returning to the physical experience. And when I'm having big emotions, right, like if I'm having anxiety, I turn to, where's it located in my body? Or if I'm afraid, where's it in my body? What's the physical experience of it? Because if I can get to the physical experience of it, I can get to the nature of that experience, and then I can let that experience tell me what it needs. Instead of me deciding, oh, I'm afraid, so I need to do this. Or, oh, I'm having anxiety, so I need to do this. Instead, I can go, the anxiety can tell me what it needs. The fear can tell me what it needs. And then I can respond appropriately, rather than from some habit formation. I think we need to, I can give you book recommendations and stuff, or you can...
There's one question online, and maybe that can be our last.
Okay.
Steve, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for your talk today. It's really clarified a lot of things for me regarding basic Buddhist concepts and ideas of impermanence and being present. And I just love your phrase, not pouring concrete on your thoughts. And so I'm curious, that's all fascinating. I'm curious, how does the concept, and again the intellectual concept of non-being and interbeing intermix with all this? Or does it?
It does. And my mind went two places. One is really super philosophical. I have degrees in this stuff, and I study this stuff. And so part of me was like, oh, we can just go to Nagarjuna and really dive deep into this non-being, being stuff. But he calls it a snake that's biting its own tail, because they both arise simultaneously, and we have to not prioritize one or the other. Right? The ultimate and the conventional arise together. And sometimes we think, oh, but real practice is when I can connect to the ultimate. And we forget that we live in conventional bodies. So that concept is really sort of a way for us to, we can philosophize it so much that we start biting our own ass. And so instead, can I just let them both be true and arise simultaneously, and see if I can let them both have influence on the experience I'm having? The way that we're interconnected, but also the way that it's not real, right? It's not permanent, it's not unchanging, it's not consistent. Did that help?
Yes.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Daigan. Do we have any announcements?
Well, I'm host, so I guess that's the next. Thank you, Matthew. I always need to someone in the box that goes, "You sing now." So please stay and enjoy the company of the Sangha. There are refreshments and hot water for tea. If you use a cup, please wash it with hot soapy water and leave it to dry on the rack, or you can leave it in the sink and I'll clean it up. I'll be going around with the Dharma bowl to accept contributions to cover our expenses. Your generosity is appreciated. Donations in the range of $10 to $20 help the Sangha meet its expenses. Those expenses include honorarium for our Dharma, talk speakers, rent for this lovely space, monthly dinners we prepare at Larkin Street Youth Service. I'm not sure. Have we started that up? Yeah, it's still up, okay. And our quarterly newsletter, mailed mostly to people in prison, but other people who need to stay connected. There's a newcomer's sign-up sheet on the credenza. If you wish to be included to receive our Sangha membership directory, please sign up and include contact information you wish to share with the group. Now, some members go out for lunch after the meeting. Everyone is welcome to join them. The group meets at the front door around 12:30. And that's it.
I also wanted to remind all of you that next week we will meet here, as usual, both online and in person. I believe it's a small group discussion as on a topic chosen by the facilitator. We also, some of us will be at a retreat in SoCal, California, at the Land of Medicine Buddha. So hope to see you in one or the other place. And yes, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know, if you aren't on the mailing list or didn't see it, Cass and George Hubbard resurrected, found, discovered like the oldest recorded talk at GBF back from 1995. And so that is now up on the website with a lot of information. It's a wonderful talk, a rich talk on gay sexuality and Buddhist Dharma. So very appropriate as, our first ever talk on record. And
who was it?
Eric Koldig.
Oh,
yeah,
I know Eric.
Who actually died just in July, and his memorial was 5 days ago.
Wow.
So, unbeknownst to me until I did a little digging. So, I really encourage you to go look that up. And I also did some research, and I've found all sorts of talks by this guy because he's really masterful. And I encourage you to look at, even those. So it's all on the website.
Well, thank you to all the people involved in getting those talks online, including yourself. And it's a wonderful asset and wonderful place to be able to get those recordings. It's great. I think at this point then, we will rise and do the dedication of merit. Daigan, would you like to lead us?
I know you guys have a standard one that you do?
We do.
Good morning.
I don't have it memorized. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.